Alright, so now that we have our scene set up, we have the, let me jump back to perspective. I have the plane here for the walls, the ceiling here, and the ceiling, a couple lights. Okay, and I like to put them on a layer once I have everything kind of set, just reference it. That way I can't accidentally select it and move it and screw it up. Okay, so I keep it referenced, and then if there's an instance where I'm realizing, jump back here, that one of my shadows is not lining up correctly, I can always unreference it and then just do some minor tweaks to this. So if I needed to, I could always grab this, and let's say a shadow wasn't hitting right, okay, because if this is up here, my shadow is going to look like it's hitting that, all right? So I can always tweak this and just nudge this around just slightly. Okay, I don't want to go crazy and do, something ridiculous, but I can nudge it slightly if I need to. Okay, in this case, I don't need to. My camera lineup is pretty good. And you'll also notice that I put a big plane back here and just put the same Mia, or the same MIP matte shadow on that one. And I've taken everything off, shadows off, ambience off. Everything's basically off on there, no reflections. And that's just a filler, okay? So now we have a scene, we have some stuff inside here. It doesn't have to be anything complex, it could be a simple ball rolling down the hallway. That's fine. But what do we need to do as far as like rendering this stuff out? For the most part, it's pretty much done. That's from another lecture. Let me just change my settings here. And you'll see that they're not placed in the correct spot because I have to right click and say render from my StillMatch cam. Pretty much they're in the right spot. Everything is lined up where it needs to be. The rendering is going to look nice, just by looking at the original image and looking at what we have here. You can tell that the quality overall is just, it's pretty much spot on. And there's not a whole lot of tweaking that needs to happen afterwards. But sometimes we do want to tweak some of the stuff. I'll let this go and then I'll unpause it after it's done. Alright, so that's a 3.5 minute render at half res. I wonder if I have my quality. Yeah, my quality's still up high, so just for testing, I'm just going to lower this, even lower than that. Okay, so right now if I click on my alpha channel in here, you'll see that I do have an alpha channel. So all my shadows or reflections and whatever else that's kind of popping in here, I have as part of this, okay? So if I needed to comp this, I could comp it using my alpha channel and just pre-multiplying some of the stuff in there. We are getting a shadow here, which I would want to turn off. All right, but for the most part, we're good. You see that the rendering looks pretty nice. It looks like it's pretty decent. There's some things, like I said, that we may want to adjust. For instance, the level of this guy's sharpness back here could be adjusted because he's just a little bit too sharp in there. We're going to get into some of the stuff, but not every single thing. So I'm going to go to my render settings, and I'm rendering this through mental ray just like before. I'm going to go to my passes tab, and I'm just going to click on the new render pass. And I'm going to create a couple things in here just so you can see what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to do camera depth. I'll do the diffuse so you can see it, the indirect so you can see it, the incandescence, raw shadow, reflection, refraction. I'll do regular shadow, specular, and translucence, UV pass, world position. Okay, these are just different ways we can render this out. Ambient we don't need. Ambient lights don't work on Mia's. Yeah, that should be good. Okay. Alright, so create and close. And then I just, if I go to my render layers, I'm on my master layer, so I can just click this, and it links all of these to my master layer. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is go to my outliner. And I grabbed everything. Okay. I went for my first object, which was my P-plane, all the way down to my P-plane 3, grabbed it all, make a new render layer, and I'm going to call this one AO. Okay, I'm going to turn that on. This checkbox on it was off. Okay, so AO. Now AO is a black and white rendering. If we render this now, we're going to get basically the same thing we had here. But I want to do is right click and go to attributes, go to presets and say occlusion. Okay, so now if we render this, we should get something that looks similar to a black and white rendering. And this is going to be used to add what are called contact shadows in here, which is just another level of shadowing that we can add to our scene. And right now the settings are not correct. It should look more like lots of whites, lots of blacks, or lots of whites and a little bit of blacks. So I'm going to, if you close your attribute editor, you can right click and go to attributes again, click on this shading group set arrow, click on this out color arrow, and now we have this setting. So I'm just going to take my max distance up to 5. And typically that's where I start, and we'll go from there. So I render this again. There we go. This is more of like what we should get. Okay. So what this is doing is giving us what are called contact shadows. So these areas here where our object is touching the floor, it just gives us another like little dark shadow. So if we were to look at, had I saved it, we could have looked at the original. We might see that the shadows where it's touching are not exactly, dark enough, or we need them to be a little bit darker. Okay. But we'll also notice in this is that we're getting a contact shadow right here. We shouldn't get a contact shadow there. That image that we have inside of our view here already has its contact shadow. I want to create new contact shadows for these. It's kind of like creating an extra shadow on top of a shadow. Okay, so we don't need the ambient occlusion to be along the walls because those are already there. I want ambient occlusion to be where my objects and the objects and my scenery intersect, but I don't want my scenery and my scenery intersecting to be where a contact shadow gets created. All right, so I'm just going to adjust one thing before we adjust that, which is maybe this max distance. I'll make 3. Just want to spread it out a little bit more. Actually, let's do not 3, let's do 30. There we go. So now we're spreading it out even more, just so you can see this guy here, he has, even though he's not making contact with the wall, he's getting close to it, and so we're getting this kind of shadowy type look to it. Okay, so I want to get rid of these ones that are on the ground that are from the wall itself, and keep the ones that are from just my little characters that are in the scene. All right, so I have to be kind of tricky about how I do that. So I'm going to click the wall or the object here, go to modify, add attributes, and I'm going to add an attribute called MI label. Everything is lowercase except for the first L of label. And I'm just going to hit this as an integer and hit OK. All right, so I'm going to hit Control A. And I'm going to go back to the polyplane shape, go to extra attributes, polyplane 1, extra attributes. There it is. And here is an MI label. And what I can do with this label is I can specify things that I don't want to have ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to say, give this a number. 2 is what I'm picking. You could pick 7 if you wanted. Okay, so I put in 2 for this. So now if I go to my attributes, my AO, go to the arrow, and I go here where it says non-self, and type in 2, that means that everything with that label of 2 that we typed in will have non-self ambient occlusion. Because that's what this is. It's self-ambient occlusion. It's causing ambient occlusion on itself. So now if we render this, as long as I've typed it correctly, there we go, you'll see that we don't have ambient occlusion in those areas. Okay, so if I saw that I was getting something up here from this, not that I'm going to get anything from that, but I could also just go to add attribute, MI label, make sure it's an integer, hit OK, and then just change this label to 2, and now this one also will not be giving any ambient occlusion to itself. Okay, so there's that. All right, we still get it from him going close to the wall. We don't get it from the other side. All right, so let's go back to master layer and hit render. Right, now these render layers, if you've never used them, they allow you to just render basically different shaders on different objects. So on the master layer, we're back to the default setup. On the AO, we have the ambient occlusion. So we render this out, we'll actually get, for the same frame, we'll get several different renderings. and then we can composite those together like we did on the first assignment, which was a CG composite. And this is going to go a little bit quicker just because I've lowered my settings on here, but then we'll be able to look at the render passes for this specific one. Okay. Now, ideally with render passes, think of the first assignment, think of that little droid guy that we did. You want to understand, you know, I have certain things that I want to do this in post, and I need to create a pass that allows me to do those things in post. So for this, what I want to do is the star that's up here, I want it to glow. Right now it's not glowing. Okay, it's just kind of illuminated. And the way I did that is I still put a Mia on it. Okay, there's Mias on everything, except for the scenery stuff. But the Mia on that one, I went down to the advanced tab and I turned up the additional light. Okay, and I'll show that once it's done rendering of how I set that up. And what that's going to do is when I do my render passes, it'll output a special coloring that I could adjust that with. Okay, so there we go. All right, so now if I click on the star attribute editor, go to my star glow, go down to the advanced section of my Mia, and go to additional color, what I did was I mapped to additional color this Mia light surface. And then I just pulled the color up, pulled the intensity and the final gather up. And so what this allows me to do is under File inside my render view, I can switch this to incandescence. And now you'll see that I have a pass that is just this, just that little area right here that I could say inside Nuke, I want this area only to glow. Because if I was inside Nuke and I just said, you know, let's put a glow on here, it's going to make everything glow. But I'm using this as a mask to say I just want this area to glow. Okay, so that's what we're doing with a lot of these, is just specifying different things we want to happen. Here's my depth, which we're not going to be able to see anything inside here, but we will inside Nuke. Here's my UV pass, which we're not going to use, but just so you can see that we can output different things like this. I also have, I thought this would allow me, oh, apparently not. Here's my diffuse. Okay, now if you look at this and you see, hey, these guys are not coming out on the diffuse pass. What's up with that? Well, if I click on them and I go to their Mias, which I terribly did not name, and I scroll down to the upgrade shader area, you'll see that it says upgrade shader to Mia material X passes. Okay, this guy is a Mia material X passes. This guy is just a Mia material. So anything that is not an X passes, I need to make sure is an X passes. Okay, because what's going to happen is it's not going to render out the proper passes when I do this stuff. So I'm just going to go to each one of these things and just say upgrade. I can also do this in the hypershade. There we go. I'll also grab my turtle shell. Those look like they're good. I'll just run through my hypershade. It's always the quickest way to do it. Okay, so if I just hover my mouse, it'll say X passes. Okay, Lambert is not going to be one. This one says X passes. This one says X passes. I believe I grabbed them all. Maybe not that one. So it's always good to check. And some of these I'm not even using anymore. They were just for other stuff. Okay, so anything that's a Mia, I have to make sure it's a Mia X passes. All right, so that's good. Okay, so now we'll go back, save this, render it again, and then I should see all these little dudes inside there. Close it. Okay, we're not going to break this apart and reassemble it. It's a little bit more work than I want to get into on this assignment. I want you just to kind of see the process of taking a still image, bringing it into 3D, and then comping it in there. All right, so now we're done. And let's see why it's important to kind of lower our settings, because we're at 1:14 as opposed to 3 minutes. So now if I go to my diffuse, you'll see that I can see all my little guys inside here. And it's obviously very grainy. There's a lot of grain happening on this because of the fact that we're low res. Here's my indirect, which is my final gathering. Here's my reflection. Here's my refraction, which I don't have any refraction, so it's not going to show anything up. Here's my shadow, nothing right there. And here is my raw shadow. Okay. And then here is specular, or sorry, this is whichever one's below specular. Translucence. There's my specular. Okay, so think of these just as masks, not necessarily, using them for the exact thing, but think of it as a mask in a way that, you could do stuff to these individual pieces. All right, so I'm going to go to my render settings, go back to the common tab. I'm going to change this to an EXR. I'm going to change my image compression to RLE, name.number.extension. I'm rendering out 96 frames. That's good. 1280 by 848 is fine, because that's our settings that we have set up. We can give this a name, so I'm just going to call this Mario Hallway underscore, and then I'm going to right click and say insert layer name. Okay, so that'll put master layer and AO appended onto that. So then I want to go through and up my settings. So my quality I'd take up to 2. My indirect lighting, if I needed this, 3 bounces, seems like a lot. I'll just do 1 bounce. I could take my final gather settings up higher if I needed to, but I think they're good for what we're doing. Make sure I pick the correct camera. That's always important. All right, that should be good. All right, so what I'm going to do is just save this. There we go. And then we will go to rendering, and we'll batch render this. Okay, auto render threads is off. We punched in a number, we hit batch render, and then away it's going to go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and show the nuke process of this. Now once you have 1 frame out, you can start doing the nuke process, which is fantastic. That's what we want to be able to do. Alright, so I'm going to take this proxy to 4, which is basically just like lower the resolution. That's all I'm telling it to do. So here is the hallway HDR. That's the stuff that we did before. This is the stuff we were doing before on there. I opened the wrong file. Maybe I don't even have a file. Alright, so let's just go read in our files that we have. Okay. Alright, so I've imported the first 2 frames. Or the first frame of each one. So here's my master layer, and then there is my other one, my AO. Right. So now, because these are EXRs, they're actually coming in as linear. Okay, and we didn't set up any linear workflow inside of Maya. It's all default stuff. So I'm just going to tell my color space for each of these to be not linear, to be sRGB. Okay. And that'll give us more of what we were looking at inside Maya, inside our real photo. Okay, here, if we look at this, you can see it's a bit lighter. Okay, we can always lighten it too if we needed to. All right, so what we're going to do is, here's the down and dirty of this, is that I can take this guy here and just merge this. Okay, and I'm going to hit Shift X because I want this to be my A, this to be my B. And just change this to a multiply. So you can see how we get these like extra dark spots here. Just kind of make it pop a little bit more. It might be a little bit strong, but we can always take this down here. Okay, so it definitely adds a little bit more realism to the scene, having that extra little bit of information kind of popping into the scene. All right, and then I can come down here and do a glow. And then I can take my width channel to my indirect red. It doesn't really matter. There we go. And what this is going to do is I can then take my brightness up. Now you'll see that I grabbed the wrong one. Indirect I did not want. Incandescence I wanted. There we go. Incandescence red. And now I can take the brightness up on that star over here. And I can also play with the tolerance if I needed to, but I think everything's going to be good there. I could also tint it. Not that I need to tint it, but I could. Okay. I can take the saturation down or up. I can change the size of it. I can even crank this up to higher numbers if I really want this to go, crazy. Okay. And then, just like before, all the stuff it can be animated. It's positioned where it is, and we can move it around or whatever. We could also try doing a little bit of Z defocus on this. Okay, so we have to tell it, what is our depth channel. And if you remember, we rendered out this depth, so I can just choose that. And then use my little pointy and pick there. And then play with my settings here. So maybe we take my size to 2, 1 and 2. You can see we get a little bit of fuzziness in the back. Okay, maybe even this guy here would be totally in focus. We can also take our depth of field up. Let's go to Result and say Focal Plane Setup, just so we can see what we're looking at. And we can spread that out. Okay, let's even make this depth of field, let's say 2. Result. There we go. And just for fun, we'll just crank this up a little bit more. Now it is blurring the background too. Okay, so you can see how it's blurring that stuff there. But now we just have control over kind of getting that to look more like it's kind of knitted into the scene by giving the background a little bit more blur as well. Okay, so you can see the effect that we have there. Alright, so now to correct the issue with the background kind of fuzzing, if we needed to, typically not a huge deal unless you really have a lot of blurring back there. But what I did was, if we look at where we left it off a second ago, we had this Z defocus, and we had this alpha channel on here. So you can see how basically everything's like cut out, right? So what I can do is then take that and pre-multiply it, which again just applies the alpha. Okay, so it reads the alpha channel and cuts it out. And if I needed to, I can go to my Z defocus and just really crank it up just for fun. Okay, so you see how everything's really fuzzy, blurred out. Then I merge that. So I just merged it on top of my glow. Okay. And I could even take this, glow off and just put it in right there. I like the glow. We'll leave the glow in there. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay. And then I can come in and play with it. But just so you can see before I get playing with it, by me disabling that, you can see how I can fuzz these things out. And it's blurring all the channels, which is what we want. Then I'm merging it on top of it, and I can come in and just tweak this to the appropriate setting. That way this background stuff is blurred, but it's not going to affect, the stuff that's way back here. I can get it to be the exact amount-ish that I need it to be. And you see I changed this to direct also, just, sometimes playing with the different math in these will give you different results. And sometimes you'll get better results depending on what you're adjusting. Oops. So leave it as depth, change back to result. My focal plane's in the right spot. And then again, I like to just kind of disable and re-enable. Now that guy's not getting any blurrier, so I want to make sure he does get blurrier. Go back to direct. There we go. There you go. So we have a slight blur to them. He's obviously clear, and this is clear as well. Okay. So if you need to, you can do this little, or the extra little setup there, just help tie things in together better. Okay. And then at the end of this, I'm going to add a reformat. We want this to be resized to our 960 by 540 or our 1280 by 720. So we could always make a new one, just like we've done before. HD 720. I have no preference as long as it's the right proportions. 960 540, 1280 720. There we go. Oops. That. There we go. And it's going to crop it. Okay, so you can see how it's cutting it there. That's fine. If we needed to, we can always come in here and do a little transform. Sorry, a transform after the reformatting, and we can kind of reposition this to line it up better with, you know, if we have something specific we want to see inside of our scene. Okay, and then once it's done, you could even animate that transform. If you wanted it to be resized, you can animate this thing kind of coming across like that if you needed to. That way it adds a little bit more dimension to it as opposed to just being a flat still image that we've added animation to it. Okay, so then again, we come in here, we write it out as a sequence, bring in After Effects. We can add a vignette inside After Effects too. I believe I showed that. And then just go crazy with some of the stuff. Okay. Just so you can see inside Nuke as well. Go back to this beginning area. We have this world position one, just so you can see what it is. But this actually writes out the XYZ position of every single point that's inside in here. So just for fun, I'm going to add a position to points node and view that. And surface point is my world position. Surface normal is my UV pass. I believe that's the correct setup. And now if you look at this, you'll see that I have basically a 3D representation of my scene. Which is, I think, is pretty cool. There we go. And there's a couple things you can do with this. It gets more into advanced stuff, but we could actually add like lights in here. So I could actually add a light right here that would illuminate some of the stuff. Let me go in here real quick. I have information for all of this. I don't know why it's cutting that out. That's my UV pass it's telling it to, no? I'm just going to shuffle black into the alpha channel. Sorry, not black, white. There we go. Now I get the whole scene. Okay. Now there are holes in here. These holes are from where the object in front is eliminating that part. Okay. So basically where this piece of object is, I can't really line it up too good right now, but you can see it's kind of almost there. Another notch. Yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so I can rebuild my scene. I can actually add lights in here and have that relit and add that into my scene, and it goes crazy with all these different passes and things we can do. We could also, you know, because this is now a 3D thing, we could also add a scanline renderer. There's our object scene. Oops, let's add a camera. Okay, we'll look through. Oops, come on. Looking through that camera right now. Come on. just line up this camera with our shot. We could even import the camera from Maya and bring it in here, which we'll do a later assignment. Alright, so let's just pretend that's good. And then we could just take this information, which is basically just a still now, it's just a still image. And we could also merge it on top of our stuff if we wanted to do, you know, something kind of stylish or stylized. Stylish. Okay, if the camera lined up better, it would be perfect. Let me just export my camera from Maya. I'm just going to grab my camera from here. There it is. I'm going to delete my keyframes. I'm going to unparent it. I'm going to export it. It has to be all by itself. That's the trick with it. Cam export as an FBX. Then we go into Nuke. I double click this camera. I go to File. And I just tell it that I want to read from that file. Cam export. Yes, I want to overwrite the data. And now, oops. Make sure it's in the right spot right here. It's merged. No. I have to go to my settings here and change my settings to be the same resolution that I brought the stuff in. There we go. So now you can see how that all lines up. And if I went to my position of points, made my points bigger, or made them smaller, you get the idea. You see this little grainy pattern that we're getting on it. I could even adjust my coloring on it by adding a grade. And shifting those around. Maybe I'll even take my points down so it's a bit more obvious that we have these points. There we go. Alright, now it does look like we just have points all over the place, but, you know, like I said, you can use these position of points nodes for other stuff besides just adding this little stylized look to it. I'm not really set on that grade anyway. Okay, so now we're kind of getting this like painted type look. Alright, so you're rendering out this guy, the photorealistic one, but just, you know, I wanted to show you some of the other stuff that's inside here too. Okay. Alright, so render it out, make it a movie, turn it in, take your snapshots, good to go. Save this comp as always. Another thing you could do just for fun is we could also come in here to this and we can add our lens distortion nodes back in and we can start to distort it a bit. Okay, now you'll see that stretches a little bit here, so I can just add a transform and scale it up. And that way we still have the lens distortion on here. Okay, you can still see where we get a little bit of bowing on this. But we just don't have that, you know, straight up and down stuff. And it just looks pretty nice having it like that. Because it gives it more of a camera look to it. Alright, just another little bonus tip. Okay, so that's it. Save. Render, turn it in,